There's actually a video of me doing the splits.
Can you can do splits?
Yeah, I used to be my first activity as a child was, gymnastics
That's cool.
because my mom was like, "You." My mom was very unconventional. I'm obsessed with my mom. We were on the phone today for, like, an hour. Um, but she's like, "I'm clumsy, so I know you're gonna be clumsy." So she's like, "You need to learn how to fall. In tumbling, you learn how to fall." But I fell in love here. I love it. I fell in love with that, and I've always maintained my flexibility. So
Good for you.
it's like my party trick because
Yeah.
people just assume like, here's this meathead guy that like, and then I'm just like, boop.
My mom was the opposite. Like, I did gymnastics for probably a semester. I was homeschooled.
Mm.
And I also did ballet for probably a semester. And with both of them, my mom was like, we're getting our money's worth out of the music classes
Mhm.
because there is no natural talent here. And so even as a young kid, like I couldn't touch my toes. Like I
Really?
would have dreams. In my dreams, I would touch my toes and I'd wake up and I'd be like, oh,
God.
maybe I can do it now. And I couldn't. And now I can touch my toes now because I've worked for it. But
Yeah.
man, the splits.
It's people don't realize it's a muscle fiber
Yeah.
situation, right? And like, do you do yoga or do you try to?
I'm I eh, my
Yeah.
I like dancing. I like aerials and
Oh, so do you do like the
I
rope
like
stuff?
working out. I have an aerial hoop.
Do you really?
I do, and so I would love to be able to do the splits so I can
I'm gonna show you. I just told you I'm gonna show you something when I was in Costa Rica. My friends loved and hated it. Do you know the pose Birds of Paradise?
it sounds familiar.
And
I've forgotten
so
a lot since
we
I've
did like this waterfall tour,
Mhm,
and I was like, "Hey," so this is the group of us.
mhm.
They're getting married next year, and this is
Cute.
like my best friend. He's hilarious. He can shake his ass at anything. And like we did surfing.
Oh my god.
Oh, it was so much fun. But then where is it? Here we go. Can just hold it. And so like
It's your adventures. When were you in Costa Rica?
2 years ago,
Okay.
changed my life. Costa Rica
Mm,
changed my life.
okay. Well, I guess we've already started this
We was gonna say, like,
podcast.
did we start or did we
We've
not
started.
start it?
We've started.
Well, let's first start with the cheers.
So I wanna just yes. Let me get
Yeah.
my notebook ready to go. Do a cheers. I wanna write down I'm putting a this is my parking lot, so I can make sure that if you mention something,
Yeah.
um, I don't know about you, I'm a tangents person. So I'll
Oh,
go down a rabbit hole, but then find another rabbit hole.
girl, I can have 5 conversations at once.
Yeah. And for the sake of my editing later, I'm like, I better take notes at least. But cheers.
Yes. Thanks
Uh,
for having me over, first of all.
thank
I
you
appreciate
for
it.
oh my gosh, I love that you were just like, "When are we doing a podcast together?" And I was like,
Well, because I remember we were talking at,
"Let's do it."
what was that event? And you were telling me you just got done doing one,
Yeah,
and I was just like, "Well, I mean, something that you'd like to do," and I never shut up, so it's just like,
and I love asking questions and talking to people and then just letting them go.
speak.
I just finished a book called Super Communicators, and they talk about the science and, um, just the structure of, like, having a good conversation, and
Mhm,
people who are having different types of conversation literally will have their brain waves going at different speeds,
mhm.
but people who are synced up, literally their brain waves are synced up, and so I think this is a fun way to help get
Mhm.
that syncage going.
I love that because have you ever heard of, like, solfeggio frequencies or, like, binaural frequencies?
No.
Oh, I'm big in that shit. Okay, so, like, binaural beats is basically 2 different frequencies, and your brain hears a difference. And so, the main ones I'm gonna get this wrong, but it's, like, delta. I always do delta, theta for going down to sleep, to power down,
Mhm.
and then there's gamma and beta, and there's another one in the middle, which I always forget.
These things you listen to?
Yes. And so sometimes when you think of,
Oh.
like, on YouTube, it's like an 8-hour, like, study video, but they always say to have headphones. It's because, for example, one side of the headphone will play, I don't know, 432 frequency,
Mhm.
432 hertz, excuse me, and the other side will probably play 440 hertz. You don't hear both frequencies. Your
Right.
brain hears the difference,
Mm.
and then that difference, your brain starts to replicate that frequency. And so for those who go to sleep, your brain is heavy in theta and delta.
Mhm.
Delta's deep sleep, complete relaxation, and
Mhm.
theta is more like REM sleep.
Mm.
And so I track my sleep like crazy because I'm a health nut and then like my watch. And so if I know I'm like lacking in REM sleep, the last like 5, 10 minutes of the day before I lay down,
Yep.
I'll listen to binaural beats of the theta frequency
In headphones.
in headphones
Mhm.
and I'll breathe to it and then
Mm.
I'll go right to sleep. But then solfeggio frequencies are aligned to chakras.
Mm.
And so, but there's 9 solfeggio frequencies and there's 7 chakras because there's 2 frequencies before your root chakra. And for that one, you do not need headphones because it's just it's this the vibration and the frequency itself is going to help you in your chakras and unlock the
Mhm.
chakra or focus on the
Mhm.
chakras. And as an engineer, we all learn in physics or is it chemistry?
Oh,
Some shit that every form of matter has its own frequency and
yeah.
everything has a
Sounds like
resonance.
physics.
I think it's physics because that's when it comes to like vibrations. Um, so you learn that everything has a resonance frequency. So I've always tell people, my favorite example is like, have you ever like had your TV on and then a certain sound will go on and then your TV would kind of have that vibration sound?
Hmm.
And they're like, yeah. I'm like, that's because the sound that's being outputted, that frequency matches the resonance frequency of the matter of the TV. So the
Mhm.
TV is responding to it. And
Oh.
so everything has a frequency, everything. So when you were talking about communication, our brains are complex computer programs. It's nothing but like electrons shooting here and there, and it's
Right.
like going crazy.
Oh.
So I love that you did that game to kind of get people in sync. Because I've always said to people, I can sense people's vibrations, I can sense people's auras. And sometimes when I'm having a conversation or a fight,
Mm.
I can tell like we are out of sync.
Right.
And I try to quickly like, whew, let me get out of this
Mhm.
conversation real quick.
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
if you're not in sync, it's going to continue to go downhill.
Right. Yeah, I've been there before. And literally, if you're having different types of conversations, you have different goals in mind anyway. So it doesn't matter. Like you can keep going down your own paths. If they're not the same path, it's not going to work.
Yeah. I mean, and people hate it because I've been in therapy for about 3 years now. And I know that I'm a good communicator,
Mhm.
but I'm not always the best at making sure that people understand what
Mm.
I'm saying. And part of that is I need to listen
Mhm.
as well, get that feedback.
Right.
So when I even try to do those techniques, sometimes people are like, you're talking so corporate or blah, blah, blah. I was like,
Right.
yes, but however, when we walk away from each other, you're going to understand exactly what I
Right.
said.
You want to be very accurate and specific.
Yeah, it's kind of I don't want to say it's a trigger of mine, but like something for me is like I really do not like being misunderstood and misheard.
Mm.
And part of it's because like I've always put that pressure on myself
Mhm.
to make sure that I'm understood and heard.
Yep.
Hence the annoying articulation. And so, but with that, even if I'm like, oh my god, the worst is when I'm on a date, in which I'm like, okay, George, you can't always be so you in there because I'm always very much like, well, what are you into? What are you looking for? What are your
Oh.
intentions? And so, but sometimes it comes off, I understand it comes off very intense
Sure.
and people just want things to happen more like naturally.
Sure.
Not everyone wants to talk about whether or not they want to have kids on their first date.
Well,
I get that. I get that.
yeah.
And so, and I've always said to myself when it comes to meeting people, depending on what the relationship is, for me personally, I always try to figure out what their intentions are, where are we going with this? That's why I
Mhm.
texted you. I was like, do any prep work? And you're like, nope. I'm like, great, cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I need to introduce those out.
Yeah, we just jumped right into it without everything else. I kind of take that as my fault.
No, I love it. That's what we're here to do. Um, there's something that you said that I was gonna write down. Oh, was it talking about aims and intentions? Oh, I remember. Okay. Setting
Mm,
intentions,
mhm.
relationships, and I don't know. It seems like you're kind of a nerd, and
Yeah.
I
Oh,
appreciate that.
listen, it's funny. It's funny you said that. Oh my god, because I just made a post on my Instagram. Oh, ooh, sorry. RuPaul, by the way, gay. Um,
What?
go- he's, fun fact. That is in my Spotify rap. RuPaul's been my number one artist for like 4 years in a row.
That's so funny.
And everyone's
Tyler,
like,
come here.
wait, RuPaul has music? I'm like, honey, RuPaul has albums. Okay.
RuPaul made Drag Race to
Like,
promote his
but
music,
like
right?
but think about the business part of it. He doesn't have to pay copyrights to play anyone else's music it's his own music.
Mhm.
And so, but like earlier today, anyways, I just like whatever. So I saw a post on Instagram, and it was of Mewtwo.
Mhm.
Mewtwo says, because everyone, if you follow Pokemon, Mewtwo had an identity crisis, right? And so he was like, I see now that the circumstance of one's birth are irrelevant. It's what you do with the gift of life that determines who you are.
Mm.
And so sometimes we really think about it, a lot of the cartoon shit that we grew up with was really deep, really deep. And so I made a post there. I was like, lately, my therapist's advice has been to tap into my childhood,
Mm.
especially in regards to video games and the nerdy side of myself.
Love that.
Because he's like, I feel like you've kind of put that side away
Mm.
for everything else. And so it's been funny because like I was recently started to start watching Yu-Gi-Oh again. And then I realized I still have my trading cards. And I was just like, oh my God. But it's tapping into a side of my childhood. I'm like, oh my gosh. And a lot of people do not realize how, to the degree, how nerdy I am. I think people may realize that I'm intelligent.
Yeah.
But like when you first see me, people think I'm some type of bro. So like, oh, he's probably like some business or some finance guy.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I have 2 engineering degrees. Like I can get into the weeds of just like, I look at things from such like a engineering perspective, like whether it's relationships
Yeah.
or like politics or like anything, I'll look at it from such
You're
like
analytical.
so analytical.
Yeah.
But then also I'm very like I have a huge like empathetic personality side. And so I think with that, because society says you can't be both,
It's silly.
and I'm like a walking example of both.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because people who've known me for I would say longer than maybe 8, 10 years, they know exactly how nerdy I am. Like my best friend I'm gonna see next week in Columbus, she would tell stories of how she would come visit me. Yes, you cutie. And like
And
we will want to go out to dinner or go out and get drinks. And I'm like, we have to wait because I'm currently like playing Final Fantasy and I gotta beat these bosses. And she will go, this effing nerd, like, let's go. And like everyone's like, wait, you play video games? I'm like, yeah. I was in college, a frat boy in the frat house gaming. And it's funny because half of my frat brothers had no idea I was a gamer because I would always do it in my bedroom. Because part of me was always like, well, that's not cool.
Yeah.
And but then now I'm like, I just embrace it.
I think it's making a comeback. Okay, wait. I'm introducing this episode.
Oh, yes.
Welcome back. Whoa, that was a big squeak right as I started talking.
Girl. Is it okay if I'm sitting this comfortable? I'm very
That's
relaxed.
fine.
Okay,
I'm
great.
glad you're relaxed. They're comfortable chairs.
I super.
I'm
Well,
gonna
they-
use clips for social media, so just as long as
Oh.
you're fine with it.
I'm comfortable.
Great.
I'm comfortable. The minute I walked in here, I was like, the aura in here is great. The aura in here is great. This
We have a toddler, so it's very much like
this plant is this
she's
everything.
beautiful.
I like low key. If you want to splice a piece for me later on and bring it to me to grow, if you are able to
I
do that.
will I have several plants that I'm happy to do cuttings of. I don't know how well this one does cuttings. I've never done a cutting from Monstera before.
I mean,
Like the purple one, super easy to propagate.
oh yeah.
That airplane plant, super easy to propagate. I don't know, probably. Like if I have
The
pothos.
toddler. We can figure it out. It's
Got
fine.
it.
But yes, introduction.
Welcome to Patchworked Pod. I am your host, Elizabeth Palmer, and I'm here today with George Farris.
Ooh.
So excited to have you. We met at a Dallas Junior Chamber of Commerce.
Talk about another tongue twister.
I know. I was like, gotta get all those letters in there.
DJCC.
Saw the acronym on my head, and I was like, if I say DJCC, nobody's gonna
You're like,
know
what is that?
what I'm talking about. But George is like very cool person. Very fun to talk to. Also an engineer.
Yeah.
Very smart.
Multifaceted.
Multifaceted, very involved in the Dallas Junior Chamber, and I'm assuming a lot of other things around that.
Yeah, I like to
So
be very
you're like
be
very
around.
community oriented.
Yes.
And so I'm really looking forward to just like chatting about all of these different aspects of your life
Yeah.
and what you do.
Yeah, I'm here for it. I love to talk about myself. But like to remove the vain selfishness from it, I think it's because one, I'm blessed with the ability to be a good storyteller. And then two, I'm an advocate of I'm not the only one. And one thing that drives me every day is that I want to be the voice for the voiceless. And I want to love for the ones who are unloved. And so from that, I love sharing my story. I love sharing my life because I know I'm not the only one out there. And I also know some people may not feel comfortable talking on a podcast. I mean, the first podcast I did, it was about breakups. It was right after I broke up too, girl. Woo! It was rough. But I love community. Okay, we'll be best friends. We be best of friends.
Once you start petting her, she's like,
Okay. My nephew Nugget does the same thing. He started whining I was leaving today. I was like,
"Mm-mm."
your mom is right
I know
here.
that.
But yeah, I love talking and sharing perspectives. And this one person said to me last week, you're always so full of energy and you seem like you're so happy. I'm like, I'm just happy to be alive. And I
Mm,
just really want to share that fundamental joy. I mean, as you know, right now, like I'm in between roles, right? And so like there's stresses in my life, there's stress in my life, girl. But like I'm not gonna let that completely dim my light. And to be able to I know people who've been without income much longer than I have, and they're
mhm,
making it work. And so
mhm,
I love sharing the authenticity of my life because I think we now live in a society, to quote one of my favorite DJs, according to my Spotify Wrapped, DJ number two, Hardwell. He had a song that says we live in a society that profits off of our self-doubt,
mm,
which is so true in so many ways.
mm.
And I refuse to become victim of that.
Yeah, I love that. So there's stuff that we have already talked about today that is in my parking lot, but
Mhm.
then your self-introduction made me wanna know, like, your life story
Yeah.
because I don't know I don't know anything about you.
Well, and the thing is, I tell a lot of people in Dallas,
Yeah.
I mean, no one's a finished project to the last day you take your breath,
Right.
right? However, the George that everyone sees today is very much a body of work of my previous chapters, in which I'm not saying I am perfect, but in regards to learning who I am and learning to love and embrace it, Dallas gets to see that side of George. Dallas doesn't get to see the George who just recently came out and
Mm,
was very much like anxious and very much like nervous and very much like trying to prove his worth. I mean, we all are in some perspectives, but I am in a much more comfortable, healthier, motivating place. My intentions are more aligned to who I want to be. While when I lived in Pittsburgh, or I lived in Columbus, or where I grew up in Cleveland, it was different.
mm,
And that's just how it is for almost everyone. So, as you kind of picked up on, I'm born and raised at Cleveland, Ohio. Um, the mistake by the lake, which people will say, which is like
okay.
my mom still lives there. She still lives in the house I grew up in. Like I go home at least 3, 4 times a year. And by home, I say Ohio. And then sometimes I go back to Cleveland. I always give my mom one trip out of the year. My mom and I talk all day, every day. But then like my best friend, like she's like my spirit sister, was in Columbus. I went to the Ohio State University. I'm still mourning my loss on Saturday. We'll get over it.
Dang.
It is what it is. As my one friend says, you can't let a bunch of college kids dictate your day.
No.
So, and all I did was just get a little upset, ripped a shot, took an edible, and continued on my day, and then put on a Christmas vest, and then went to a
Yeah.
Mariah Carey themed drag show.
Oh my god.
Girl, it was hilarious.
That's amazing.
Um, but yeah, so I studied electrical engineering at Ohio State. To me, electricity was everything. It was like magic to me
Mm,
as a kid.
mhm.
And I always like to break things down and try to figure out how things work. And so my mom was like, "You're gonna be an engineer." And I was like, "I don't care about trains like that." And she was like, "Oh no, there's different types of engineers." But the thing was for my family, I am my mother's only child. I am my dad's debut of three,
Mm,
was raised as an only child. Um, my sister and I are close, and my brother and I are developing our relationship because it's just how those families are. But I was the first one out of like that family to be like, I want to go to college, and I want to go to college. I just want something freaking twice. But when I was at Ohio State, I studied electrical engineering and then focused on power and control systems. So talking about some nerdy stuff. Like
yeah.
I can tell you exactly how does your phone work, and I can
Mm,
tell people exactly why your phone gets warm. Like my phone's always hot
yeah.
because I'm always making that battery oscillate to freaking get a signal.
Yeah.
Um, I also decided to be different and minor in security, intelligence, foreign domestic policy. A lot of engineers tend to like
Mm.
study business instead. I was like, no, let's learn about like this country, and let's like learn about like the CIA. Let's learn about like the MI5. Let's learn about like politics on a deeper
Mm,
level,
mhm.
not like oh the economy, but like gerrymandering,
Right.
like regulations, like and
Yeah.
um so those 2 together really kind of like I just love to look at things and break things apart.
Mhm.
But musical side, I was also in the marching band at Ohio State. Okay,
What was your
girl.
instrument?
I played the flugelhorn,
I love that.
Yeah, but I did not know what a flugelhorn was until they handed it to me because I tried out with the trumpet. So I
Mm,
played trumpet in high school.
mhm.
Played flugelhorn. I was in the marching band for all 5 years. I took 5 years in college because I said, why not?
Yeah,
It was common for engineers to take a fifth year,
yeah.
and I had an academic scholarship.
Mhm.
And so it was supposed to be 5 years of free tuition. But John Kasich, you destroyed that for me. But it's okay.
Mhm.
We'll talk about that another time. So I already paid for 1 year of school,
Sure.
which I can't complain,
Mhm.
right? However, like to be honest about it, like we couldn't afford to go to college. And so
Yeah,
the fact that I told my mom, I said, Mom, I'm gonna go to school, I'm gonna go to school for free. And she was
yeah,
like, okay, okay. But I mean, we could have gone to community college, and there's nothing wrong with community
right.
college. There's nothing wrong with going to other universities. But when I was, I think, a sophomore in high school, I fell in love with the Ohio State marching band. I fell in love with the tradition there. And I think I've realized at a young age, I have a really big personality and I have a lot of energy.
Mhm,
And I kind of told myself, this world is so huge. I need to be exposed to as much as possible.
mhm.
So going to one of the largest freaking universities in the country just made the most sense. Because at the end of the day, my mom always told me, she was like, once you're an adult, the decisions are yours.
Right.
And to my parents, she goes, I'm here as your mom, but like you need to learn how to interact in the world you want to be in. And everyone has their own journey, and not to shade anyone else. But to me, I was very much like, I need to go to a big school because I need to understand what it's like to be on my own
Yeah,
because I do not want to be coddled at all.
yeah.
And so I did that for 5 years. And then when I graduated, I moved to Pittsburgh. This
Fun.
the sports city or the drinking problem, or the drinking city or the sports problem.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the two. Lived right downtown the South Side. Whew. I worked for a military contracting company
Okay.
where I was building submarines and aircraft carriers. Talk about an intense job for a 23-year-old. Where I tell people all the time, if you watch Star Trek or you
Mhm.
knew of Star Trek, and like when stuff hit the fan and they called the engineer, I was that engineer
Yeah,
that they would call.
yeah.
At which picture being, 23, 24 years old, and
That's a lot of
you have
responsibility.
commissioned warships that's gonna need your help,
Yeah,
right? And then I was in charge of commissioned warships, and I can't say which kind
sure.
because obviously reasons. But and then also new construction boats.
Yeah.
So really complex machines. And then at that point, I continued to realize I love learning how things work,
Mm,
but how do we as humans make it happen?
mhm.
So I cared about like the complexities of a submarine, but what were all the processes and the timelines and how you ooh, and like how do you get all that done to build it? And then how do you get the labor for it? Like what's the logistics behind shipping stuff there?
Yeah.
So I said, let's
So
go
you're
about
project managing as well.
yeah, but on like a more intense level,
Right.
which then sparked me to go back to school, in which I got my master's in industrial engineering. Um, and which I used to tease a lot of my industrial engineering friends in college, and I apologize to you all because your major is a lot of fun. It's fun if your brain thinks like our study does,
Yeah.
because it's all about how do you make sure you have the right person do the right task at the right time with the
Mm,
right resources.
mhm.
And that's a really dumbed down version of what we do.
Yeah.
But it's that engineer that's able to say, okay, cool, we designed a Google Pixel phone, but the industrial engineer is like, how do we make 2 million of these and they have no defects, little to no defects, right? So reducing variation. So with that, I became a Six Sigma practitioner, all that fun stuff, quality management. And then it got to the point where um patriotism wasn't paying enough for the bills as because I told my one boss, I was like, I have a master's degree, I have 6 certifications, like, and you only gave me a 2.5% raise. Like, you're fine, you're fine. And then I said on top of that, my company helped pay for the degree, but they didn't pay for all of it. I would argue, I think I paid for around 60% of the degree,
Yeah.
and then my company reimbursed 40% of it just because of the reimbursement policy and the timeline. I did not want to be there forever. And so I was like, all I get is a 3% raise. And my professor, she moved to Texas and
Mm,
she's like, I need a manager who understands the fundamentals of lean and it can teach it and can connect to people. And she's
mm,
like, I know that you can do that. So she kind of brought me down here, which was a huge leap for me to go from like my little Cleveland, Columbus, Pittsburgh area where I'm always a 2-hour drive from home,
Right.
you know, to now being a 2.5, 3-hour flight from home. Um, Packed up my little Dodge Dart, drove that car down in 2.5 days and
Mm.
moved here. And then stayed here ever since. That company went out of business like a year and a half after I was there. But then, the only annoyance thing about my Dallas life experiences have been like my career has been very like turbulent.
Mm.
Um, but everything else has been amazing.
Yeah.
I thought I knew about Dallas before I moved here. I have a good friend, who's lived here. She's like a childhood friend. I've known her since I was in middle school and she was in elementary school. I was like her reading buddy,
Mm.
cutest thing ever. And now she's this beautiful woman who's just playing the game. And so from that, I knew that I had connections here. Um, but I was surprised how much I fell in love with the city. Kind of maybe I
Yeah.
told you when I came over here that like south part of Dallas is like a very different part of the city
Yeah.
at which there's greenery here and there's a different vibe. And
Yeah.
I always wanted to live in a bigger city with diverse groups of people
Yeah.
that are okay with spending time with each other.
Mm.
Not saying that Cleveland, Columbus, and Pittsburgh and like Chicago, LA, and New York City, blah, blah, they don't
Sure.
do that. But I I am really surprised with how well Dallas has just embraced this young metropolitan-esque lifestyle where a lot of I mean, the one thing that we all care about is how much money you're making,
Sure.
which is fine. That's
Yeah.
very Dallas.
Yes.
But like at the end of the day, I have friends of all shapes and sizes and colors and religions, and it's been great. It's been
Was
great.
there any culture shock moving from from Ohio to Dallas?
The biggest culture shock for me was not realizing how many black people lived here.
Oh.
Even though it's the South, so, like, the
Yeah.
South itself has a higher and it's 'cause it's funny because I was
I grew
just
up in South
yeah,
Carolina,
and
so
I was just talking to my mom about that, and I don't mean just, like, black people, but, like, um, because there's black people everywhere, but to be around a lot of black professionals, black gay professionals specifically as
yeah.
well, really threw me off. Because
Oh,
I for 28 years of my life, well, I was out when I was 24, but
sure.
like for the majority of my life, I was always told that I'm so special. I'm the unicorn, which is to some people they love that, but they also
Mhm.
gets very isolating if you're told
Mhm.
that you're like nobody else,
Mm.
right? And then you kind of have like this like, well, if I'm like nobody else, why are you my friend? Like it's just like the whole identity kind of crisis. You don't really feel like you have a community
Mhm.
or a representation, if you will.
Yeah.
And so, like we were just talking about RuPaul, like there's
Yeah.
when I tell people if you think about queers of color on TV or who are famous, besides RuPaul and Don Lemon, who else is there really that the entire country knows about, right? Like obviously,
Mm.
like I know Coleman Domingo. There's so many other people,
Sure.
but to move to Dallas and within 2 years, like my best friend Dominique, he's also from Ohio, but
Yeah.
he's an educator down here. And then my friend Sean, who we're gonna do the wine walk with, an educator, and just so many people, like my friends Justin and Devin, are getting married in Mexico. Bougie ass wedding. I'm so excited for it. But like just to have to realize that I wasn't alone. Everyone's special in their own way, and I understand that I'm very special as well. But
Sure.
like when it comes to just like community, it's nice to for once be at a space where I'm not the only blamed.
Mhm.
And consistently, it was like I was always the only like black kid, or always the only gay kid,
Mhm.
or like the only nerd.
Mhm.
And I'm really good at flexing in spaces, and it's
Yeah.
not a problem. But it's just nice to like, my friends, the ones I was just mentioning, will do like game nights,
Mhm.
and it's fun because there's like 15 of us, you know, all queers of color, all over the spectrum, all doing different things. And it's just like I would have never thought that like Dallas, Texas would have that.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that's gonna be really hard for me to like even leave. Because it's really, really, really nice
Yeah.
because I can talk to people in a way that they understand. Like they know what it's like to walk in a room and having to deepen your voice a little bit to not sound like you're such a little flamer, or to try to code switch in other ways. And
Yeah.
but then part of that's also it's why I do it less now,
Yeah.
because I don't feel so isolated
Yeah.
anymore. So with me not feeling I kn girl, I love you. But
I'm rubbing her butt, so
the
she's just really excited.
I guess, like, from my perspective, the less I feel isolated,
Mm.
the less I feel the need to do the code switching and so I've been feeling more like myself and
Yeah.
enjoying anywhere I've been. And like even like with the startup company Algo Pair, the co-founders are all black men from South Oakland. And I love that,
Mhm.
right? And so it's just all this, it's like a city of opportunity.
Mhm.
And on top of that, you can create your own reality here in a way that there's an abundance of so much stuff here.
Yeah.
While like I love Pittsburgh, but it was just very small and
Yeah.
it just lacked certain things
Yeah.
that I loved.
Yeah.
I would still move to Southern California, but at
Sure.
the same time, like I would go to Southern California because I love like the lifestyle and like the weather, but at the same time, I'm gonna lose some of that community
Mhm.
as well. And
Mhm.
so, and also on top of it, like Dallas is all my jobs required a lot of travel, and Dallas being a direct flight
It's a hub.
under 3 hours
Yep.
anywhere in the country
Yep.
just
It's huge.
drastically changes my entire life.
Yep.
Like going to Columbus next week, 2 hour flight direct,
Easy.
easy peasy.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. I don't know if we talked about this yet, but I was born in Namibia.
Okay.
So I spent my life kind of going back and forth between Namibian and American cultures. And so I learned those coping skills. I think they're coping skills, like learning how to code
Code switch.
switch or,
Yeah.
you know, move
Now, where
between
is the other
cultures.
area?
Namibia
Yeah.
is right above South Africa.
Oh, okay. So are you a dual citizen?
No, my mom's American, so when I was born, we just didn't well, I didn't make the choice, but, Namibia did not do dual citizenships at that point, so
Gotcha.
they were just like, "You can get into more countries with an American passport, so let's stick with that."
Yeah.
Um, but I do think very much, like, learning how to move between spaces, it's, like, such a good skill for so many types of jobs, like, being able to help other people feel comfortable
Yeah.
when you're a different person
Yeah.
is like it's a skill, but it's also a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
So when you're not having to employ that constantly because you found, say, people, it does make sense that you're then able to like go out into the world and be more open
Yeah.
um and be more of yourself because you know you have that safe space to go back to.
Yeah, and your brain is kind of like when you're code switching or where you're constantly being a chameleon,
Mhm.
you tend to sometimes get lost
Yes.
in your own identity
Yes.
because like so even with me like in college like Engi I love telling people this. I was an engineer,
Mhm.
I was in the marching band, so everyone's like, "Nerd."
Right.
But then I was in a fraternity,
Right.
and I worked at Abercrombie& and Fitch,
Yes.
and I was also a recruiter, and
Yeah.
everyone's like, "What?" I'm like, "Yes." And so, like, being
Can't put me in a
yeah, you can't
box.
really put me in a box, but however, like, when I'm with my fraternity brothers, I would act one way versus when I
Mhm,
was with the marching band friends versus when I was
mhm,
with my engineering friends, and so now like, so it becomes a coping mechanism and defense mechanism, but sometimes you get exhausted because then you're also like, "Well, did I make that joke to that friend? Probably not
mm,
because I'm with that group, so I must have made that joke with that friend," and then
mm,
and then people go, "We should just do whatever you wanna do," and I'm like, that is a luxury that people don't understand, that a lot of people do not have that sense of safety to
mhm,
do whatever they wanna do.
mhm.
Now I have a group of people where the things that come out of my mouth and the things that we say to each other is just so relieving, and which then when I'm able to go back into the world,
Yeah,
my brain is just very much like, we're ready to go."
yes. I think it's definitely it's, it's a privilege to be able to just be one version of yourself in the world,
Mhm.
but I think a lot of people end up doing that because they're not forced to have any kind of, like, self-discovery or they don't have to like, there's it's like a spectrum of being, like, one version of yourself, like,
Mhm.
one version is so well actualized, like, one version knows yourself so completely that it doesn't matter what situation you're in, you're just always like, "I'm centered, I know who I am at my core," and then on the other end, it's people who, like, are one-dimensional because 'cause they've never been forced
It's
to
like their
go
only
any
trick, and they don't they
hardship.
can't compute.
Right.
And so I have always argued the I always said everyone's multifaceted. The question is, how well do you know that about yourself? And that
Right.
requires you to be in different places and different spaces.
Right.
That also requires you to be around people where you can actually just like completely let your hair down.
Mhm.
Because then that's how you can kind of realize, like, oh, I didn't realize I had that insecurity. But if you're constantly having a defense mechanism,
Mhm.
and your guard's always up, because I a lot of people don't realize, except for my friends, and they're very annoying about it. I'm a very guarded person,
Mm.
very guarded person. But a lot of people do not know that because I know enough of how to give people enough to make them think that I am like naked.
You're speaking
And yeah, but like the thing for them, like they have no idea. Like, yeah, I'll let 2 levels of shields down, but
Mhm.
there's like 1,500 other. But
Mhm.
you don't know that
Mhm.
because the average person puts down maybe one guard. So I'll take down
Mhm.
two. But that's how I'm able to connect with people. But my friends are always like, you can go deeper, you can do more. We love it when you're emotional.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ugh, that is gross.
Yeah.
But it's because, we've all have to navigate in this world in a certain way.
Mhm.
And it's funny 'cause I was just listening to a podcast this morning that was talking about just like relationships, and like she made a very, very, very um good statement about, when you write down the characteristics of what you think a good person is, and then you compare that with what you say is masculinity.
Mm.
There's literally no alignment.
Interesting.
And so there's a paradox between what society says being compassionate,
Mm.
being respectful, being patient.
Mhm.
But then we always, from a male perspective, we're like, you got to be a hustler, you got to be aggressive, you got to
Mm.
be. And so it's like there's this paradox
Mhm.
where we are literally not letting a group of people be a certain thing that society says is what it means to be a good person. And when we do that,
Come here, Farris.
um, and which when we do that, it forces men, for example, to stick
Right.
with what the podcast was talking about, to find the only emotion they can express. And which one thing a lot of people will say is in America, I don't
Mm.
know about the other world, but
Sure.
we can argue it's almost as hard as the same. The one emotion that we're used to seeing men exhibit is anger.
Yes.
And because anger can be shown as strength or being like blunt, being to the point. But
Right.
if those are the only emotions, the only things you're practicing, then you have no idea how to be
Right.
vulnerable. You
Mhm.
have, and so that's when I listened to that podcast. I said, wow, that's very eye opening. Because if we say great people are compassionate and this and this and
Mhm.
this,
Mhm.
but then but we glorify, or when we talk about like what certain things are and it's not that at all,
Mhm.
just like code switching or just like being in different environments, if I'm constantly in a place in a space where I can only exercise one tool, then I'm not going to know how to use the other 99 tools.
Right.
But if I have a community of people where they let me use all my tools, and then you can learn, oh, I'm not good at that, but I'm great at that.
Mhm.
Or, like that is one thing for me. I've said, like, that's when people meet me in Dallas, they see me in this way where I trust myself to be able to navigate any environment I'm in now. While before I'll get kind of anxious and I'm like,
Mhm.
ooh, what's gonna happen? Who's gonna be there? Where are the exits? I say
Right.
do that one.
Mhm.
But like trying to understand the safety perspective. But now when we do that, it's about trust of ourselves and our environment. And my trust within myself has drastically increased. And that's been like a beautiful thing for me because I'm just now much more at ease.
Mm. How old were you when you came out?
24.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
My come out story is layered. And so I've always said I came out to myself when I was 24, and I came out to
Mhm.
my friends when I was 25. And then I had the child with my mom when I was 26.
Mhm.
Granted, my mom was just like, she was like, I knew, she goes, I knew that you liked boys, but I was confused because you dated girls. So I just
Mm.
assumed that you were bi. And I was
Mm.
like, oh, okay, great. And, like, now me being older, my mom and my mom and I are so close, and my heart hurts for those who don't have at least one parent
Mhm.
that is, like, advocates everything for them. And so, like, she sometimes will call me saying things like, Was there anything I said or anything I done that made you feel
Mm.
like you couldn't be yourself?" And I said, "Mom, no, at the end of the day, if you think about it, I think sometimes when people talk about sexuality, they focus on the 3 letters more than the rest of the letters.
Mhm.
They just focus on the sex part of it. Being gay isn't just 2 men trying to have sex. It's also an expression. It's also a connection, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
Um, and I think one thing for me that I hope for in the future is that it's as simple as, like you have a toddler, and we've all been part of this, but we're in school, sweetest day, Valentine's Day. "Oh, are you gonna write so and so a letter. We so quickly put people in these heterosexual norms at a young age, which I argue a lot of non-heterosexuals deep down have resentment towards,
Oh, I'm sure.
because it's like, well, why couldn't I write a letter to Bob?
Right.
Right? Well, Bob's my friend. I like Bob. That's
Mhm.
gay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And so it's because in the day, and then the minute that happens, they're like, well, your 5-year-old son wants to have sex with my 5. No, it has nothing to do with sex. The
No.
majority of sexuality has nothing to do with sex.
Yes.
And so mm, and that's what I've told my mom. I said, the one thing you've always did for me, mom, is you allowed me to learn and express myself at a young age in a way that clearly a lot of all these humans did not get to
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
And so yeah, maybe you made me a little bit like OCD on being too prepared and too much like on guard and very guarded and not trusting people, but people here fucking suck. So I get it. But um, when I came out to my friends and everything like that, like, a lot of my friends were very much like, they weren't surprised.
Mhm.
Even the ones even the only I think the only person who was really surprised was my ex-girlfriend. And I feel bad that and I feel bad, like, airing that out because it's just like, we were in love. And I tell people all
Mhm.
the time, like, every girl I dated, ranging from, like, gymnastics,
Yeah.
Vanessa Palmer, like, when I genuinely like someone, I genuinely like somebody. And I can actually understand how closeted men or bi men end up getting married and having children and, like,
Yeah.
live their lives with this what ifs,
Yeah.
because everything's on a spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we so quickly align things to behaviors. Yeah, I'm eccentric and I'm hyper and I like to high kick and like blah 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 blah. But if you're saying that's what gay is, that means you're telling me that every single gymnast is gay. You're
Right.
telling me every single like there's just like take a moment here
Yeah.
and just realize that like I know some homosexuals that could walk past you and you would think that they are the most alpha male.
Mhm.
You think they have like 15 children with 15 different women, and they're literally the most flamboyant people in the world.
Mhm.
And then the opposite. I know some straight men who are married, who are having children, and they are more eccentric or as eccentric as I am. Like
Yeah.
it's just that's why I tell people it was hard for me because
Mhm.
like everyone focuses so much more on the sex side,
Mhm.
and which because of that, when you're even your child, like you didn't feel the shame, but you don't realize there's so much more to it than just that. And so it was a 2-year journey because for me, I had to wake up the next day and say, "Well, George, you were obviously gay because you just kissed a guy in public at a bar." And so when you go out today,
Yeah.
people are gonna be like, "Hey, I saw you kissing a guy." So you
Yeah.
you now can't lie about it because it's out there now.
Yeah.
And so, it was hard because then I had to have this whole breakdown, like, what does that mean? If a group accept me, blah, 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 blah. And then I was like, "Okay, well, I'm just gonna be gay." Like, I'm gonna be gay, but I'm gonna still be cool. I'm gonna still
Yeah.
be like a bro,
Right.
which is just horrible that I even thought that,
Mhm.
but it's because I had to go through that alone and go back to the code switching part. Like, my friend group, the Berg Brunchers, I love them so much. We actually have, like, little T-shirts.
Mm.
I think I'm the only one who still has it because I took it very serious. Um, but we were 6 people, I think all of us went to school, but half of us were all engineers. But the thing was I was the only gay one,
Mhm.
and so with that, if I'm around 5 straight people all day long, how do I know to be gay? And how do I like, my Spotify Wrap basically calls me gay every year because my number 1 artist is RuPaul, and, like,
Sure.
which is fine, but, like, I'm not listening to RuPaul with my straight friends who we were watching football,
Right.
and so it was a whole journey, and that me coming to Dallas, I've been out for, like, 4 or 5 years out of that point. I've already dated guys, and so it's been nice because Dallas got a side of me where I became comfortable with making mistakes,
Mm.
and becoming comfortable making mistakes meant I became more comfortable with myself.
Yeah. And Dallas, I mean, obviously Dallas is in Texas, but it's to me, it seems like a very welcoming city in a
Mhm,
lot of ways.
mhm.
Like, not every neighborhood, not but I mean, we back before we had a toddler, I loved going to Roundup
Oh, yeah.
and just dancing, but, um, like, I don't think I ever like, I grew up in South Carolina, in Columbia, and there's one gay bar.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to, like, just imagine being in a place where it's like, "Oh, everybody can come here," and
Yeah.
it's so beautiful.
Well, that's
Um,
what I was talking about the wine walk, right? Like, it's
yeah.
gonna be super fun because so many people were there, and my sister and her wife came to visit. Plot twist, my sister's a lesbian, and so my dad had to really deal with that.
Mm,
But, like, her and her wife have never been to Dallas, and they came for a whole week,
mhm.
and they were like, "Now we know why you love living here."
Yeah,
And it's not just because of the gayness, but they were
yeah,
just like, you you know, I took him to Bishop Arts, I took him to Max Henderson, I was took him to Oaklawn.
yeah.
They were shocked that there was a lesbian bar. They're like, "Wait, there's a bar for" I was like, "Yes, there's a place and a space for everyone here."
Yeah.
And my sister-in-law, she goes, "You can literally never see a straight person if you wanted to." I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Honestly, you're about to be my one friend." He's like, "Wait, where's that bar?" I'm like, "Not in the neighborhood," you
Mm,
know? And my mom's like, "What's a neighborhood?" I'm like, "'Cause like in Ohio, I mean, all 3 cities, Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, I even though people think Ohio is a trashy state, it's actually a great state, and it's been a bedrock to so many amazing things to our country, and will go to the toe to toe about so many random fun facts about Ohio.
okay.
Um, but like there's no real, like, major, like, gayborhood in any of the major cities,
Yeah.
but a lot of the cities, especially Columbus, like, there's gay bars everywhere, and, like, no one like, the epitome of frat boy bar
Mhm.
is right next to the epitome of gay bar,
Mm,
across the street from gay club. Like,
mm.
and, like, then you have, like, this black southern style restaurant right next door, and it's so cool about that with Columbus.
Yeah.
But, like, it's nice here in Dallas where you have the Roundup, and then you also have, like you also have Lava Lounge, which is, and then you also have, like, the new gay bar Crush, and you have TMC. You have all these places where each bar has their own identity.
Mhm.
Sometimes I just wanna have a nice cocktail and chat. I'll go to Cheat Code. Sometimes I want to just rip shots and listen to EDM. I'm gonna go to Mr. Mister. You know, sometimes I wanna just see an amazing drag show. I'll go to the Rose Room or I'll go to Crush if I wanna, try the like right now they have the holiday pop-up. So you wanna check that out. It's pretty cool. Um, you guys owe me a free drink for that shout out, by the way. Only because I'm really good friends with the owners. And so, but it's cool that, you have that, and so when people think neighborhood, people only think about 3 major cities, honestly. They only think about WeHo in LA, Boys
Mhm.
Town, Chicago,
Mhm.
which is also Andersonville, and
Mhm.
they just think about New York, you know? Or just DC, like DuPont Circle, but, like, when I tell people, "Yeah, there's a huge inclusive neighborhood complex in Dallas," and ironically, it's just south of the most wealthiest neighborhoods, which is doesn't it checks out. But it's just,
Totally.
um but that's what's so cool about this city. And then, like, sometimes I'm like, "I don't wanna be around gay people,"
Sure.
you know?
Yeah.
And then I go other places, and
There's plenty.
there's plenty to do here.
Yeah.
And I really like that about the city.
Yeah. There's a lot of food here.
Oh my
I think, yeah. I mean, we've been here for almost 10 years, and I feel like there's so much that we haven't explored yet or haven't done yet. Um, but okay, I love all of that.
god. That was a
I
long
was
tangent.
no,
Let's
that
go
was
back to the
good.
parking lot.
Well, I do, yeah, because I listen, the parking lot so far, it's getting long.
I know, it's getting longer and longer.
Um, oh, well, so one of the comments that I wrote down as you were talking, is something that, like I mentioned earlier, I grew up homeschooled, like I
Mhm.
grew up pretty religious, conservative. Um, and so one of the things that I have just seen on this side of things is like America is obsessed with sex, whether it's like controlling it or telling people how they can or can't do it or selling it.
Mm.
I mean, just looking at advertising and movies and all of that stuff. Although I guess they're more in love with violence in a lot of ways. Um,
I mean, they're kind of like cousins with each other, right?
sure.
Especially like in some movie
Some
scenes, there's usually a violent scene, and then the guy gets sex afterwards,
right.
or and it's funny you say that because I was just talking to my mom about like drag queens, and she's OG like accepting all that jazz. Like I remember the first time I made her watch a RuPaul episode, and her response was, "These girls are on TV. My friend Pretty Tony can beat all these girls," and I'm like, "Who the hell is Pretty Tony?" And so But it's funny because we were just talking on the phone. She goes, I support drag queens. I just, them being at schools, I just don't get, and this just seems too sexual for me. And I
Mm,
said, I understand that, mom, because you view drag queens as adult sexual entertainers,
mhm,
but drag queens are allowed to be multifaceted like we are.
right,
And I'm like, but, like, my mom's also she's very traditional, and she's very much about having an open space for children to learn and grow without any adult influences. So I see where she's coming from with that. Like, I was like, "Well, because I was like, "What about, like, Beyonce? What if Beyonce were to go to elementary school?" She was like, "Well, Beyonce," she was like, "I feel the same way as well." She's like, "Beyonce's up there dancing and shaking her butt and shaking her breasts." She was like, "We don't need that to be exposed in front of our children."
mhm,
And she was like, "I know they're seeing it, but, like," and I told her, I was like, "Yeah, I was like, Mom, I get that." And I think what my mom is really saying at the end of the day is that she really wants our educators
mm,
to be the main priority of our children, because my mom's a
mhm,
huge advocate of that.
mhm,
And I think and I respect that, and I understand that from her
mhm.
perspective. But then even with that perspective, I told her, I was like, "Yeah, mom, the Pride events in Dallas is really cool because there's an event where the drag queens are actually reading to the kids, and the drag queens are actually performing shows
Mhm.
to songs that they grew like, I was like, and I told my mom, I was like, it's because our obsession with sex and how
Yeah.
sex is in the forefront. So when you think of Beyonce, you think of how sexy she is. When you think of drag queens, you think of how it's a guy who did things to his genitalia, blah blah blah. But I'm like, sometimes they don't talk. All right, if they're wearing a freaking dress or like whatever, they don't need like. Sorry, but it's like, you know, it's as like a drag queen is just an entertainer, right?
Right.
Now the majority of the
Chaperone does drag now, and
yeah,
it's like, no, I think for her, it's like a way of masking herself to the
yeah,
public.
it's an armor.
It's armor
It's armor.
and self-expression at
Yeah.
the same time.
It's beautiful, and I told her, I said, Mom, like, one thing I saw was very beautiful a couple years ago, we went to me and my friends all did Pride and went to the events, and to see the children get so excited with the drag queens and be like, like, to see, like, these whether they're boys or girls, like, be in, like, this color, and they're painting their face, and they're so excited, like, this one kid, this had, like, blue on their face because they like the color blue, and the drag queen had a blue dress, and was like, Can I get a picture with you?" And I'm
Mhm.
like, "None of that is sexual.
Right.
None of that is sexual," and I can tell you that kid went home feeling like a superhero, and, like, me even saying that is getting me so emotional because I just feel like so quickly because of the sex point you mentioned, we rob people of those innocent
Yeah.
experiences,
Yeah.
and it's just r it just oh my god, I'm getting emotional. It
Okay.
just sucks
Yeah.
because, like, even when I say about me, like, I have friends who I have a friend, he's like, "I've been out of the closet since dancing my first breath," and I'm like, I honestly envy that
Mm.
because they got to be gay and just, like, have a friend and be that gay friend, or, like, go on a date where they're too young to have sex, so they're just, like, hanging out, the same thing that we all did heterosexually wise, right?
Right.
And because his parents did not over sexualize him,
Yeah.
and his community didn't over sexualize him,
Yeah.
and it's but, like, sex sells, and sex and violence hand in hand in our country,
Yeah.
and it's all about profit and consumerism, and, like, that's why now, like, I made a joke, one of my I guess I can call him an ex, he turned 40 yesterday, and I was like, "Well, congrats, time to get testosterone and start banging on kids half your age." He's happily married, but it's to joke with the fact that, like, nowadays, men, again, are having an identity crisis because they're not producing testosterone the way they want to. When you're 40, you're not I understand you wanna stay healthy, and there's a thin line and balance, but the reason why a lot of these men, whether they're bodybuilders or not bodybuilders, are taking the TRT or HGH is because they feel like they're not a man anymore because society has said, if you're not sexy like Channing Tatum, well, maybe not been the right no, that may not be the best example, but, like, if you're not sexy like this type of guy, well, you're not really a man. And it's like,
Mm.
first of all, or like C-Bum, like the bodybuilder. He is an international bodybuilder.
Mm.
The minute he loses those muscles, he loses his identity, right? And I tell my own friend, because him and I are really big into fitness. I used to be a fitness instructor, and I tell him, like, you are a teacher.
Mm.
You can be obese or skinny or how you look now, and you're gonna still be a teacher.
Um,
You're gonna have to remind yourself that, like, th- these people on social media and things like that, if they aren't sexy, what are they?
Mhm.
And I'm like, I actually feel really bad for them
They're
because
one thing.
they're one dimensional.
They don't get to be
They don't get
multifaceted.
they don't get to.
Mm-mm.
And it sucks. And I actually feel bad for them. Now, some people do a great job. Like they move out of that and do other things as well.
Sure.
But if you really think about it, and I really did the exercise this year because I realized that Instagram has a limit of how many accounts you can follow. Really embarrassing. Because I met this really cute guy at a bar and he gave me his Instagram and it wouldn't let me follow him because I hit the limit.
Oh, I didn't know that's a thing.
Yes, because according to the algorithm, if you follow more than 7,500 accounts, it's considered spam.
That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people. And so I'm like, how do I follow all these people? Then I realized like we're both 34. So
Yeah.
we had Instagram in college,
Yeah.
right? And so job fairs, following
Mhm,
that,
mhm.
all these models, all these fitness people. And I used to be a fitness instructor, bought all these gyms. I'm like, so this year alone, I went from 7,500 people down to 3,800.
Good for you.
And my For You page is so much more healthier.
Oh, I'm at 4,500.
That's not bad. That's not bad. And so it's funny because one of my
I'm
favorite,
just like, boop,
because the thing is when you look at someone's For You page, you're like, it shows you what you want. And so it's funny with me because like my For You page now, like I can get emotional about it. If I look at my For You page and look at it now
hmm.
compared to how it was like last year. I don't know. It's a jacked bear. That's wild. But then also, I mean, you have some fitness people in here, but like you see college sports,
Yeah.
you see self-care, you see, I guess it's Star Wars, so nerdy stuff. And
I'm
then
mostly wicked right now.
and then you see like fitness models, right?
Yeah.
But like right now, I'm not gonna say his names and I don't want to throw him out on the bus right now. But if I would grab his phone on this for his page, the majority of these are all gonna be big burly men
Mm,
who work out,
mm.
which is fine.
Sure.
But if that's all you see,
Right.
it's back to what we're talking about with your frequency.
Yeah.
And so I had to, and fun fact, there's no easy way to unfollow 3,700 accounts.
Mm-mm.
I had to individually, one at a time,
Go
unfollow,
through and choose.
unfollow, and go through and choose.
Dang.
It was a huge exercise because I
Yeah.
didn't realize how much I was becoming part of the whole like sex sales situation.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of, I mean, I was already aware of like how young it starts before I had a kid, but since then I'm just like more hyper aware. Like I see so many kids, like little baby boys wear shirts that say "number one heartbreaker" or shit like that, and I'm like, "Ugh, don't don't do that," because we miss out on like. I mean, I think men suffer from it, especially because there's this idea of like you can't have a friend like well, I say men, but, like, specifically straight men
Mhm.
miss out on having really deep, good connections with other men
Yeah.
because it's like, "Well, this is kinda gay, so we can't do this." And so because we have distilled relationships down to sex, whether they're
Mhm.
romantic relationships or not, we miss out on the opportunities to have strong like, I still have a problem not a problem, um, but, like, having male friends who are not already friends with my husband, I'm like, "Oh, can I just
Yeah.
have guy friends
Yeah.
that what?" That and so we are missing out on opportunities to connect with other people who can enrich our lives, whose lives we can enrich, and we can just, like, make the world a better place
And on top
overall.
of that, it's funny because I just had this conversation.
With your mom?
No,
Oh,
who was
okay.
it with? Oh, it's with my one friend who's gay, who's trying to figure out this dynamic that he's going through.
Mm,
But I argue that because of that is
mm,
why we have so many tumultuous relationships.
mhm.
Because there's a difference between companionship and partnership.
Yes.
So, and like you can get non-sexual companionship from your friends.
Mhm.
Your friends can, like my one friend who I was just referring to, he came to my place. We both loved Agatha all along because we both were nerds. Came over there, smelled a little bit, watched the season finale, and just talked and hung out. And it was just so nice because you don't need a boyfriend to watch a TV show.
Right.
You don't need a husband to watch a TV show. And so, and I think with men specifically, because I think society gives women like, oh, have your little girls' night, go have a pajama party and go cuddle with each other. It's fine. You guys are women. But,
Mhm.
you know, I remember me specifically, it got to an age that my sleepover stopped. And it's
Mm,
kind of basically when we all hit puberty.
mm,
Because at that point, like, we're not, I had friends growing up with where we were all sleeping in the same bed together. Or like, my mom making this big cot because we're like 7 or 8. Like, no
yeah.
one's getting boners at night, And like, but we're young boys. And then
Mhm,
once we all became teenagers and things started smelling and things started
mhm,
doing things, you know, friendships change. And I think for me uniquely, I have a huge group of straight friends all over the country. And some of those friendships are kind of strained right now because of obvious reasons. But like they really value their friendship with me because I showed them a deeper level of friendship than like, hey, let's drink beer and watch football.
right.
I'll text them and I'll say, hey, Bob, I'm just thinking about you. How are you? And how's the new baby? And how is your wife handling that? But how are you handling fatherhood?
Right.
And they will respond back to me saying, you have no idea how much that text meant to me.
Mm,
Ironically, they're probably texting like a whole bunch of other guys,
sure.
but not one of them thought about how's my friend feeling today. And that's because we rob that level of brotherhood.
Mhm.
And like one of my closest friends is straight and he just had his baby 2 weeks ago.
Oh.
So cute. And I'm so upset that I wasn't in Ohio to be there. And it's funny. I remember when I came out to him and he looked at me, he goes, okay. And he's like, I've always known you were gay, but it was your journey. And it was like, really? He's like, yeah. And the thing of, I mean, he's like, you're like my baby brother. He's technically my big brother in my fraternity.
Mhm.
And we have the closest friendship in which even in like, I learned to have this conversation yesterday. Good allies do not care what negative news they get because of them being an ally. And
Mhm.
now I'm remembering that like, there were times where like his class, there were brothers because he lived on the third floor of the second floor, before he went to the other house and before he graduated 'cause he's older than me. But sometimes they're like, "Brian, are you gay?" Because you and George, he's like, "No, I'm not gay. That's my little and we're really good friends. Period."
Mhm.
And we have such a strong connection where whenever I go visit him, his wife loves it. Loves it. And I flew up for the baby shower, and she was like, "You 2 need your time as well." And I have a lot of appreciation for that, so that's why sometimes I get very upset when society tells men that they can't do something,
Yeah.
because I have a lot of straight men in my life that I give them that space.
Mhm.
And in my opinion, they're one of the best men I've met ever in my entire life because they aren't one-dimensional. And sometimes it sucks to realize that I may be one of the only friends that they have that they get to be that way. And I think part of it's because, like, with me being gay
Mhm.
or trying to figure out with me being gay, and on top of me being black and old, like, I made a joke. I was like, the last time I was in a predominantly black space is when I gave my valedictorian speech in high school. So I
Mm.
went to predominantly black high school. Ever since then, like, I was always one of the few black kids. And so I knew what it was like to feel different.
Mhm.
And because of that, any connection I made, I never wanted them to feel different. And I think
Mhm.
so often we, as people, but especially men, we suffer in silence.
Mm.
And we're told that's what it means to be a man.
Yeah.
Not realizing that suffering in silence is the only emotion you can express then is anger.
That was just the last thing on my parking lot. There's still so much more. I want to see if you can. Well, there. I don't. You wouldn't be able to guess. You've
And
taught
I can
about
always come back.
Spotify.
I can always come back for another episode, girl. You're a quick drive, so it's not bad.
That's true. Um, I was. You talked about Spotify Wrapped a couple of times, and
Mm-hmm.
I just looked at my. I use Apple Music a lot,
Ew.
and my top.
Just kidding.
My top artist was Dora the Explorer.
Oh, because you have a kid.
And I made it into the top 1,000 listeners for Dora this year. And Apple Music connected to the Google Home.
Yes.
So go to album.
Oh, yes, yes,
Or like,
yes.
please play Dora the Explorer. But still, it was like Dora the Explorer, Daniel Tiger, some other kids album. and then Beyonce, like
Well,
her new
there you
album.
go. Then you're
I
like,
was like, really? Anyway,
yeah, because people
my
forget.
identity.
But it's funny because like I saw someone post saying something like, "Oh my god, I can't believe my Spotify rap said that. It's so accurate." Well, yeah, it's data, but yeah, how well are we actually keeping track of what we're doing for 365 days?
Right.
Right? And it's funny because you're not the first person that I've met the past week or so that was like, my number one artist is a child's person. I was like, well, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, because you're a parent.
it makes sense.
So yeah,
Popular.
mine is RuPaul and then 4 DJs.
That's great.
Which is my life. And part of it's because I mean, I love high energy music, and I used to be a fitness instructor, so from that, like, that, like, when I wake up in the morning and I need to get a workout in, I'm not listening. Like, to those who listen to, like, more chill music
Yeah.
and work out, God bless you. Like, that's
can't do it.
great.
I
I
listen
can't.
to audiobook.
Do you really? Oh my gosh, I love that. Like, I love listening to audiobooks. I love listening to podcasts.
Mm.
But when I'm working out, I
You want that music?
I needed to be pumping because I'm not
Wow.
there going crazy. In which my doctor, if he was here, would say I'm an overtrainer, and I would tell him, "Shut up, I'm pretty." But like, we're actually working on how to not be such an overtrainer. Yeah, because I remember you talking about how your brother does personal training and things like
Yep.
that, right?
Yep. He was my first podcast guest.
Oh,
We
really?
had a good
Yeah,
episode, but we talk a lot about moderation. It's hard.
it is hard. And then like for me, like, because my doctor does blood work on me, and he's like, "Hey, we have a chat. You're healthy as a horse. However, there's certain hormone levels
Mm.
that are showing that your body is stressed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I am concerned that you have conditioned your body to operate under only stress. So we need to figure out a way to like not do that."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, "I'll get fat." He's like, "Shut up. You my doctor is super cool. I love you." Um, because he'll walk in, he goes, "You're fine, but did you work out today?" "Yeah." "When was your last rest day?" Last week." He's like, "Okay." So, but now I'm trying to incorporate better rest, and my rewatch does that as well, which is great.
I did see you have a cool smartwatch there.
Okay, first of all, the wristband makes it look cooler than what it is
Sure.
because you can change it out. So when I'm working out,
I have
I'm
one
not in
that's
this fake gold chain,
yeah.
but you can take the chain off. And so
What's the brand?
this is the Google Pixel Watch 2. So when you said Apple Music,
Cuter than
oh yeah. Yeah, like when you said Apple
like
Music, I was like,
watches
"Oh, yeah, gross." I am anti-Apple in so many ways, for so many fucking
well,
reasons.
so actually one of the things in my parking lot is because I noticed you had the Google phone. I noticed the watch was not a square.
So why
'Cause
Android?
a square watch is so dumb. But I also know you have 2 engineering degrees and a lot of apparently cybersecurity experience.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I'm like, I wondered what you think of those things. Why Google versus
First of all, why am I in airplane mode? That was weird. Um, I hate Apple for the reason that it lacks individuality for people.
Hmm.
But when I used to work with the military and had to have a work phone, it was an Apple phone. However, there was a major security issue
Mhm.
because the way that Apple works, great
Mhm.
if you want to be encrypted and protection and things like that. But then if there's a major issue, there's a major issue. Um, Androids are Androids themselves are able to get more viruses because you're able to unlock your phone and do more things with your phone.
Mhm.
But if you're not an idiot with your phone, you're fine. So, but I've always enjoyed like how with Androids you're able to completely personalize how the phone does just for you. And so with me having a Google Pixel phone, I have a Google Home, I have a Google Pixel Watch, I have the Google Headbuds. They all are in sync with each other,
Mhm.
just like Apple products.
Mhm.
However, like you mentioned how you have a Google Home and your Apple Music, right? And
Mhm.
so two different companies. And some people can argue, well, George, Google has all your information. Well, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they do anyway.
Yeah, like you sign that away the minute you make an account.
Yeah.
So, but I think Apple, my one friend and I talk about this. Apple is great for one thing, and it's if you want to have less techie people learn how to use tech.
Mm.
And so, for example, like my mother, she's 67, but she's never ever gonna do like a smartphone. But
Mhm.
like Apple's designed to streamline. Everyone uses their phone the exact same way.
Mhm.
Like I'm sure if you unlock your husband's phone, you're able to navigate his phone, and vice versa. But if you unlock my phone, you'll be like, where the F is your stuff? Because
Maybe I'm pretty good at figuring that
I'm,
stuff
I
out.
mean, I'm sure you are.
But
I'm
yeah,
sure you
I
are.
I see your point. I see your
But like
point.
you can completely navigate and change how you are, and that's why
Right.
like recently I've been congratulating my Apple friends when they update their phone
Yeah.
because now their phone are RCS compatible.
Mhm.
And they're like, "How'd you know my phone got upgraded?" I was like, "Because Apple finally got forced to do what it should have done, but because the EU forced them, America did not care."
Mm-mm.
But the EU was like, "Listen, Apple, like you can continue your iMessaging stuff, but you need to have certain basic form of communications to be the same." That's even why the new iPhones have the same charger. And so that's why for me, like it got to a point from an Asian perspective, it was like Apple purposely tried so hard to be different
Yeah.
and then branded it
Right.
and then made people feel like they were elite because of that.
Mhm.
So for me, I was just like, ew. Not you
No.
I already clocked that girl. But it's not
Yeah.
you specifically. It's
Right.
just the
It's
the
just the brand.
company themselves and the way they
Mhm.
branded it.
Mhm.
People think that like, oh, well, I have the new iPhone, so but I was like, girl, your camera pictures, I had that same camera on my iPhone, on my Google phone or my Samsung phone 3 years ago.
Yeah.
The hardware is because with Androids, you're allowed to be more expressionate. You have more expression. So the engineers always get the newest hardware.
Mm.
But it's also why sometimes it's a little bit more buggier. And
Mhm.
so that's why one of my friend, he got the brand new iPhone. And he goes, "Oh, I could do this and this and this with my phone." And he looked at me and goes, "I know, you've been doing that for years." I was like,
Mhm.
"Mm-hmm."
Dang. Yeah, I have the MacBook Pro, and I really like it for editing and everything. But
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure there's a good laptop equivalent that's not.
Well, for the creativity space, that makes a lot of sense,
Yeah.
right? And then like I tell people, I am old. I'm 34, and when I was in college as an engineering student, Apple products were not compatible with any of my labs.
Mhm.
We couldn't, especially when I was like playing with generators and like doing all this other stuff,
Yep.
working in Linux and those other kind of things. Like the only things that were compatible was Windows,
Right.
and it was also a huge gamer.
Yeah.
And so with me being a huge gamer, I had an Alienware laptop. Like
Mm.
of course, I'm not gonna have an Alienware laptop and then an iPhone. Like, that's
Right.
just not gonna make sense. And back then, it was BBM, BlackBerry Messenger, which was the
Mm.
cool thing to have
Yeah.
back then. And so because of that, I never really had the enticement for Apple.
Yeah. Makes sense. Um, we've really recently we've been really into. Well, I say recently. It's in the past few years. We started playing Minecraft, which has been
Mm.
our.
Yeah. I hear it's like a huge. I've never played it, but I hear it's like a huge like mine game.
As an engineer, you might, I don't know, you can be creative within it
Okay.
and build things and get different materials. And then you need certain materials to be able to get other materials. Anyway, that's my nerdy. I'm a nerd about a lot of other things.
Yeah.
Minecraft is the video game that we've been
Playing it.
going for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, oh, you talk. I'm trying to retrace my steps. Like, why did I talk about Minecraft? Because you talked about your gaming computer.
Yes.
So we're talking about Apple. Um, Parking lot. Okay. Whoa. Okay, I'm gonna read you what's on my parking lot,
Yeah.
and you can tell me what sounds interesting.
Okay.
Costa Rica. Engineer. Setting intentions in relationships.
Ooh.
Video games, we kind of a little bit talked about that. Drugs. Um, Musical theater slash communication. And I don't remember why I wrote this down, but there was something you talked about wanting to be super clear. And while you were talking about that, or maybe it was because you talked about band, I'm curious if
Mm.
like some of those communication skills, like a lot of times I find people who are good communicators have done theater or improv or something like that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was
yeah.
curious if that's
Well, because the marching band, I mean, especially at Ohio State, like, not to talk crap to the new kids, but they got famous now because of what we were doing my year. I mean,
yeah.
the Ohio State marching band has been famous for years, especially in the state of Ohio.
Yeah.
But I know that was crazy.
Sorry.
But my last year in college in 2012, 2013 season is when we had the video game show, ironically, the theme of video games,
Mm,
where we actually made a horse and galloped it across the field.
mm.
And when we made it across the field, um, E. Gordon Gee, the president of the university, was like on an interview. He goes, "Hold up, the band is galloping an effing horse across the field,"
Mhm,
and that's when the entire country was like, "Wait, what is this merchant man doing?"
mhm.
And ever since then, like they've been doing these moving picture shows. Like we used to do like maybe one or two a year,
Mhm.
and they do them a lot more, and
Wow.
that really requires collaboration and communication because we're in college, and like it's not like I graduated, became a professional marching bander. you know? And so like being an electrical engineering student, being a fraternity, working at Abercrombie Fitch, and also being in a marching band. It's
Right.
like, how am I able to memorize music and all this stuff? It required discipline. It also required communication and collaboration. And so I kind of agree when it comes to like theater and like things that require a lot of moving parts at once. If you can't communicate, you're not going to do well.
Right. That makes sense.
And so I definitely agree with that one. So we can check that one off real quick.
Was there and then the last thing on my parking lot is just the necklace. I was curious if it
Yeah.
had any significance, so
Yeah,
that's
no,
what
it's
parking
funny.
lot.
It's I think it's I love it because it's very unique to me, and I think that one day I'm gonna eventually get a tattoo, and
Mhm.
but the second tattoo is gonna probably be a trident, um, because a lot of guys who look my frame, if they're wearing a chain, it's usually a cross, and so
Mm.
so a lot of people look and they're like, a trident. Like, what's going on here? And so I've always been fascinated with water, and I've always been fascinated with like mythology,
Mm.
going back to the nerd side.
Yes.
So
This is the nerdy
this, yeah,
I
yeah.
I am
And
so
so, Poseidon is
Mhm.
one of my most favorite Greek gods and stories, and a lot of people don't realize, and because everyone says like Poseidon was the god of the oceans,
Mhm.
but he was technically god of the earth, while
Mm.
Zeus had the heavens and the skies, and
Right.
Hades had hell
Right.
or the underworld. And so his trident was very, very particular to a lot of things that he did. But on top of it, he can cause earthquakes. And people were like, I think people didn't realize he can cause earthquakes because he was the god over like that area. And his trident would be how when he was angry, his trident would be how he would trigger the earthquake or whatever.
Yeah.
It's mythology, so
Sure.
your own interpretation. And so I've always been fascinated with the trident because it always reminded me of the power of Poseidon and also reminded me of like with anger being an emotion you can express, it can be very damaging,
Mm.
like an earthquake.
Mhm.
And so the trident reminds me to stay strong in my foundations
Mhm.
and to stay like rooted. And it's like my reminding myself that my weapon is myself.
Mm.
And so like you always see Poseidon because he had the trident.
Right.
And that trident was the status of his strength. And so to me, it's a reminder of the status of my own strength to myself.
Yeah.
To stay strong in my foundation. While sometimes I have multiple different pendants and I would change the pendants basically between what I'm feeling, what I'm trying to manifest, what my intentions are. So you will usually see me in a trident or in a rose.
Mm.
And the rose is one that really reminds me to lead with love.
Mhm.
And also to enjoy my uniqueness, enjoy my sexuality, not to enjoy me having sex.
Yeah.
Because the rose also kind of represents also like Aphrodite, and everyone thinks that she was just like some promiscuous goddess,
Right.
but she was more than just out here banging out people.
Connection.
Yeah, it's all about connection.
Yeah.
And so, but I also have one that's like a compass,
Mhm.
and I wear the compass when it's me reminding myself only I know my true north.
Mm.
Because there's a difference between north and true north,
Mhm.
because people don't realize that the poles always oscillate. And so, true north is your north. If you had a compass, north necessarily is not always going to be pointing towards the map of north,
Right.
right? Because the North Pole can switch.
Mhm.
Um, and then I have like the Italian bullhorn one. I can't think of the actual term. But that one's just for good luck. And then there's one that's just like it's an exquisite design that matches the bracelet. And then it's like this design, but it's like a pendant.
Mhm.
And I put that there. And I feel that one when I'm feeling spicy. Because it's a unique design. And I'm like, I want to feel spicy because I'm unique. And so, but you will usually 90% of the time, you will see me in the trident.
I love that. I think one of the interesting things of like Well, you're talking about anger being the acceptable form of emotion. And I think probably because you have 2 engineering degrees, and are very smart, like, you could probably be angry at somebody and, like, just take them out with your words. And so, like, the self-control, but, like, do it in a way that's so smart that they're not even gonna realize that you're
Yeah.
taking it out.
Well, I mean, I don't want to say I had anger issues,
Sure.
but whenever I was emotionally hijacked, even still now, my first response is anger.
Mhm.
And I am able the more angry I do become, the more I like to show off my vocabulary. And I think part of one of my big triggers was talking earlier, the like not being heard,
Mhm.
or not feeling like I'm understood.
Mhm.
And that definitely aligns to me feeling I'm being like I'm taken for granted, and also
Mhm.
feel like when people are treating me like I'm stupid.
Mhm.
Um, because I try not to come off like I have 2 engineering degrees, I'm so smart. But it's like I am very
It's
smart,
very
I'm
approachable.
very observant, so don't effing try me.
Yeah.
But then when people try me, like my best friend, him and I were just talking about this. He's like, George, I love that you've been in therapy and been really working on regulating like how to communicate and
Mhm.
regulate your emotions. He's like, I miss it when you used to just tear people up to shreds.
Yeah.
But the problem would be, I would be so angry. All I wanted was blood at that point. And like I wanted that person to feel the pain that I was feeling.
Mhm.
And then realizing the majority of that pain I was feeling had nothing to do with them.
Mhm.
Even if they made me upset,
Sure.
so sure, maybe 10% of that entire tidal wave to sit with Poseidon,
Mhm.
maybe they deserve 10% of that, but they did not deserve that entire emotion behind that.
Sure.
Because I'm actually mad or angry or frustrated at something else and is blown up against the dam, and then that person is helping to break the dam.
Mhm.
It's not right to just release all that on them. And I think so often, anger, aggression, intensity, right? Like going back, like talking about like sex and like violence, and it's everything has to be intense for people to hear people. But now I'm in this point in my life that I am choosing peace, and
Mm.
which is like,
Love that.
if I have to become intense to make myself be heard, then I ask myself, do I want to be heard?
Mhm.
If I have to get extremely angry and use colorful language to make you understand me, that's why nowadays if I'm like in like a tiff, I'm like, whew. I was like, we're missing alignment here. Let's
Yeah.
take a break. Let's figure it out. Or, if we keep going down this path, it's not going to go well, because it's just realizing the fact that like when you become angry and you become emotionally charged, the original goal of the conversation is now
It's fun.
it's gone.
Right.
And now it becomes a race to over who wins,
Yeah.
whatever winning means. And I used to be the person like I would do whatever effing takes to win. Um, and because of me being very observant and because of my intelligence and because I'm very approachable, I used to use those three to make people feel bad to ever even cross me.
Mm.
But now I'm just like, people make mistakes.
Oh.
I make mistakes.
Mhm.
So we don't need to anger is an emotion.
Yeah.
Being mad is an emotion and it's a valid emotion, but it should not be the only emotion communicated. Because if you break it down to the most simplest situations, being angry is when an expectation is not being met.
Mhm.
And you are angry because you have emotional attachment to the expectation to be met.
Yeah.
But there's so many other ways of communicating that before you get
Yeah.
angry. And so that's why, like, yeah, I agree. Like, oh my God, the things I would say, I mean, I was valid and I was right.
Mhm.
Correction. I was right, but I wasn't valid in saying that. Just because I know the answer, just because I see something, just because I may know something, it's not my job to always say it,
Mhm.
whether it's in a fight or if someone does something and I'm like, because I'm also not just an engineer, but I've also done like consulting and like I do process. I'm really big on like motivating and like influencing people. So my work side will easily flex into my personal side. And which then I realized this is like new for me. Not everyone needs to hear my opinion.
Not everyone deserves it.
That too. And so it's very much like Nowadays, I'll tell people how I feel if they want to know. Sometimes I'll voice my opinion. I'm always going to voice my opinion.
Sure.
But to the degree and to the intensity, not always
Yeah.
anymore.
Mm.
Because like you mentioned when we first started, we may not be aligned. So if we're not aligned and I say something, you know, it could it can throw you off.
Mhm.
I have one really good friend, and him and I had a really good conversation a couple last week, and I appreciate it so much because I told him something that I will argue is like a 3 on the George scale, and he told me it was a 9 to him, and that was the most eye-opening, beautiful, vulnerable statement that he not maybe not that he ever told me, but that conversation was so necessary
Mhm.
because everyone's in different scales and levels of receiving and giving and different levels of tenderness as well. And I think the key of being a good communicator is to also sense where someone is at and to learn how to tailor your message to them.
Yeah.
The way that I speak to one person should not always necessarily be how I speak to the same person,
Yeah.
but the intention and the message could be the exact same. But how I communicate about like my boundaries or things like that. Like my my best friend here, I can call him up. I'm like, girl, that pissed me the F off.
Yeah.
And here's why. And
Yeah.
he'll be like, girl, let's get a bottle of champagne and let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Right. 20 minutes later, we're crying because we love each other. We move
Mhm.
on.
Yeah.
Right. But someone else, I may not be able to say WTF
Right.
because they may be like, whoa, he's really angry.
It's getting so emotional.
Yeah. Because especially on top of it, like, if people don't realize that I have emotions and I show emotions, they're like, this robot has a heart.
Mm.
Like my one friend, she calls me human AI, which the more and more I think about it, Claire, I love you. The more and more I think about it, I just giggle because she's like, George, the way your brain is. She goes, are you sure that you're human? I'm like, yeah, last time I checked, I definitely am.
No.
But no, I completely agree. And the thing is, I'm learning that I don't always need to prove my intelligence to someone else.
Yeah, and if you're surrounding yourself with people who have good intentions and who are kind of aligned with you, as a person, then those kinds of things I think become a little bit easier.
Mhm.
Um, I saw an interesting video the other day about it was like, here's an example of what a conversation can look like when two neurodivergent people get together. I think it was
Mm.
like specifically geared towards people with autism, but I think there are tools like setting conversational expectations or relationship
Yeah.
expectations.
Yeah.
So the example was like, hey, I care a lot for my friends, but I'm sometimes clumsy in the way that I talk to them. Or I don't think to ask them if they need something or like
Yeah.
want a glass of water. So can you just tell me if you need something and I
Yeah.
promise I will not be angry about it or feel like you're overstepping your boundaries.
Yeah.
And the other person's like, I actually feel really uncomfortable expressing my needs. And so like having that at the beginning of their conversation was like a way to kind of find a middle ground. Like, here's our
Okay, well,
friendship agreement.
yes.
I promise to do this if you promise to do this.
I love that because
Yeah.
that same conversation with the person I was just talking to, and it goes back again about like how I feel people specifically, but also men
Mm,
suffer in silence. And so this friend and I, we were having a conversation and we were talking about neurodivergent or someone being on autism or things like that. And one time we were having a conversation and I was like, why do I need to tell you this?
mhm,
It was as simple as like, come over. It was very much like, come to my apartment.
yeah.
I was like, I'm home by this point. Come over whenever. And then like a long time dwelled. And I'm like, where are you? And he responded, when waiting on you. I'm like, I've been home. And I literally said to him, why do I need to tell you to come over?
Yeah.
But his response was like, well, George, I'm autistic.
Mhm,
And I was like, oh, okay. Help me understand this, right?
yeah.
And the beauty of that is that our friendship has blossomed because now he understands that my intensity isn't because I'm frustrated. It's because I actually like have love and I'm very
You
passionate.
care a lot.
Yeah. And so it's passion, not intensity. But if you don't realize that, you're like, this guy is
Kinda like the same.
intense. Yeah, because the two sides of a coin, right?
Right.
And then I'm like, my son, I'm like, what is like work? Or what's going on with your brain?
Mhm.
Oh, now I know. Now I know that in certain social situations, you're not going to act on your own without someone giving you the green light.
Right.
Now that I know that,
Yeah.
the way that we communicate, night and day different. And it's beautiful. And I get so frustrated when people say things like things were easier back in the day. And like,
For who?
right. Yeah. And so like one thing with my mom, not to air out her laundry, but like it was funny. A couple years ago, one of my cousins got married, and I got to a wedding, obviously. And my mom was like, "Did you know I have ADHD?" And I was like, "Well, that doesn't surprise me because I'm nightmare as fuck, you know." And she was like, "Well, how'd you know?" I was like, "Well, it's sort of genetic."
Mhm.
And so I'm like, if I'm over here walking around with my brain overclocking 24/7, I got it from either you or dad
Mhm.
or both. But I lived in the same household with you.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of traits that I am not doing that I
Mhm.
realize is due. And so
Mhm.
I'm like, I'm sure I could do the test and fall somewhere on that scale as well.
Mhm.
And so, like, even today, me and her were talking on the phone. She was like, I just sometimes is, just got to sit down. And I'm like, you don't have to be as intense on it with what people who are not like you tell you. Because when she was in school, if you go back to it, not to age her, I think I've already said she's like 67. So when she was in school in the 60s and 70s, especially as a Black woman, they just called her slow.
Mm.
And on top of that, ADHD, and she's left-handed. And back then, they thought if you were left-handed, you had it. And the irony is
No.
both my parents are left-handed, and over here, I'm righty. But it's just funny when people don't realize that within like 30 years, there's been an exponential change of understanding.
Mhm.
And from that, you can learn how to educate differently, you learn how to communicate differently, and you're also able to humanize the experience better.
Mhm.
Um, and that's one thing for me I really love about work. I love to humanize corporate America. Because real quick, that corporate wheel will make you feel like you do not matter.
Mhm.
And in my line of work, because my work is so influential,
Mhm.
you know, I'm consistently a dotted line manager, meaning I can't tell you what to do. I can only influence you.
Mm.
And so part of my trick is how do I humanize this experience? So if I can humanize it, you then realize I'm not just telling you what to do to make something more profitable. It's I very much my favorite thing to do. I love asking people when I do like my operations consulting. What is the number one thing about this job that you just do not like?
Mhm.
And they're like, what? I said, what's the number one thing in the job you don't like? I already have 15 things I want to do different for you, but like at the end of the day, I want to know if what bothers you the most is within one of my 15.
Mhm.
If what bothers you the most is my number one, great, we have alignment. Let's figure that out.
Yeah.
But if something that's bothering you, it could be as simple as like every time I push this button, it gets sticky.
Mhm.
Didn't realize that. So I was able to have a maintenance routine process in there. And I was like, well, would you feel more comfortable if we implemented a process to make sure that button did this better? Yeah. Great. We can do that.
Mhm.
And let's also talk about some of these other things. What do you think?
Yeah.
Just by that first conversation, they're so much more open to the saying what can be done to help them in their situation. And then by the end of the day, they leave work going, oh my God, that thing that annoyed me for freaking years, Jordan's gonna help get that fixed.
Yeah.
That quickly, that person felt seen and heard and respected.
Mhm.
And that's what I really care about in my career craft. And like, how do I have people leave that day feeling confident in what they contributed,
Mhm.
whatever that was? How can I help them feel better about what they're doing? And so, and that's why with me, I really try to like tap into that emotion and also like use the annoyingly technical skills that I have. But from that, it really helps me humanize the experience. Cause I think quickly, I mean, you even mentioned with your toddler, like quickly things are just bombarded
Mm.
at people
Mhm.
so much. Like to be blunt about it, everyone's complaining about the prices of eggs, but then Black Friday, it was another record of spending.
Yeah.
Make it make sense,
Yeah.
right? But it's because people are being bombarded with information,
Right.
and that duality, no one's talking about how people are feeling.
Mhm.
No one's talking about, you know, having to feed their families or understanding that they feel like they're getting left out. And then also the psychology behind Black Friday. The majority of Black Friday specials isn't really about people saving stuff. It's about companies getting rid of stuff.
Yeah.
And at the same time,
Giving us the illusion that we're spending less money.
yeah, it's because at the end of the day, a company's not going to say, buy this phone to a point where we're not going to make a profit.
Mm.
And so when people see a TV that's 50% off, to me, I get disgusted
Mm.
because at 50% off, you are still making a profit.
Mhm.
But the way that we psychology teach it, they're like, oh my God, I'm going to save $800.
Right.
You should have been saving it beforehand.
Right.
But because that TV's not selling as fast, well, we got to drop the price because our margins. And trust me, I get it. I understand margins, I understand all that stuff. But, the psychology behind that, we quickly get bombarded and we forget about the human experience.
Yeah.
So, like, I remember when I used to work at Circuit City when I was in high school, but talk about going back in time. And that's when the Wii's first came out. Like, to see the ugly side of consumerism at such a young age, but a really bad taste in my mouth.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I just remember, the store I was at, we'll get anywhere between 7 to 15 Wii's once a week
Mhm.
because it was such a high demand.
Right.
People would be in line and then people would cut each other and people are like, well, my kid wants it. I'm like, you are all parents.
Yeah.
Not one child is more important than the other. And it was just the way they would talk to me, and I'm 16.
You were also a child.
Also a child. Like, I remember one time this guy spit at me because I wasn't able to give him a return because I'm just like, are you kidding me?
Mhm.
You've sat on this receipt longer than you should have. This is a you problem, and you're angry because you can't be held accountable.
Yeah.
And I think that's when I quickly was like, wow, humans suck.
Yeah. What a young age to learn about. Dang. Um,
You want to do one more?
you want to talk about Costa Rica?
Oh, I would love this. What do you want to talk about Costa Rica?
I want to know why you went and why it was life changing.
Yes. Okay. So the why I went is an easy answer. So it's going back to what you were asking me before about Dallas, and in my communities with different friends. So in my Black queer friend group, we always want to do a trip once a year.
Mhm.
And it was hilarious. So 2 years ago we did Costa Rica.
Mhm.
And last year we were supposed to do like I think like St. Lucia or whatever. And we
Mm.
ended up going cabining in Oklahoma. And I was very much like, what a tease. But I honestly had so much fun because it's just a way for us to escape and just be together and experience life. And so uh, Costa Rica was life changing for me because to be in an area so far away from home and to be immersed around like I met people from all over the world there. Um, and then on top of that, like to go we went snorkeling and I joke as I had my Black Ariel moment, like, 'cause I used to be a swimmer. So just being in the ocean with these beautiful fish, I've never felt so connected to Earth
Yeah.
until I was on that trip.
Yeah.
Because we flew to Costa Rica, so we landed in San Jose, and then we took like a little charter plane to Tambor Beach. So we
Mm.
were not in like a very major city. We're more in the secluded area. We had a beautiful villa. We had a chef there who had such fresh fruit every day, like the papaya. I
Mm.
felt like they picked it that day.
Yeah.
The pineapples are so good. The people were so nice. And it's ironically just because of my skin tone, people were like, are you from here? And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I don't know. I think one of my goals is to do a 23andMe one time just to see where the DNA comes from.
Yeah.
But it was just fun for that. And then like my best friend and I got into a really nasty fight. But that fight actually sparked one of the most beautiful conversations for us to ever really like understand.
Mhm.
Our communications have always been misaligned. And
Mm.
and so from that it actually launched us to have a much more stronger brotherhood.
Mhm.
And so, but just like I remember one time, so we were snorkeling and then we went to the beach, and we were there for a couple hours. I swear I met so many different people from different countries. And it was interesting to see their reaction to me telling them I'm American,
Mhm.
right? Because they're like, "You?" I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "What about them?" Because we were all different shades. I was like, "We're all American."
Mhm.
And is interesting to go international and to see how other people look at Black queers,
Mm.
and they just assume that a lot of us are from other Western nations. I remember when I was in Canada for work, they assumed I was Canadian, and when I told them I was American, this one guy looked at me and goes, "How do you feel about that?" And I wanted to be insulted, but I understand, right? And I think sometimes Americans don't realize that we are 330 million people in a world of 8 billion. And sadly, 7.6 billion people are really keeping tabs on what the F we're doing over here.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but with that, it was just so much fun to connect with different people. And like, we did surf lessons with a regional champion, and that was just so nice.
Mm.
And the thing on top of it, like a lot of these experiences that I'm talking about were not expensive at all because we decided to not do it at like a major city. We did not decide to do it like in Los Angeles. We were in Costa Rica, and then on top of it, we went ATV riding, and once we got into a little accident, I wasn't the problem. But it's just
Always
funny because like we're in a we're in a completely different culture where in Costa Rica, it's not about suing to get rich.
right.
They're just like, just give us 20 bucks and be fine. And we're like, what? They're like, yeah,
Right.
20 bucks and be fine.
Yeah.
Cool. And they took the one thing and just bent it back. It works. Unlike in America right now, we will be getting sued.
Right. It'll be $1,000
Period. At least.
at least.
And so it was just fun to be around people that really just enjoyed life.
Yeah.
Like pura vida. I mean, to be blunt about it. And it was just when we flew home, I
Kind of
told myself,
depressing.
sort of. But it just reminded me so much of like the world is beginning to make me realize. And like our villa was right off of the ocean
Mm.
where I took a little mushrooms one time,
Ooh.
and then I called my friend, and I was like, I'm at the beach with Poseidon because I was so just like mushroomed out.
Yes.
But then on top of that, like
Way to be.
where we stayed, there were parrots that came to the house all the time, and it was just to be around so much nature was just so cool.
Yeah. I've got 3 rapid fire questions for you.
All right, let's
Can
go.
you do rapid fire? Can you
I'll keep it
one?
short. I used to do Toastmasters, so I'm really good at keeping things short to the point.
We'll see.
We'll see.
What is one thing that you have unlearned recently?
Unlearn
Mhm.
that I do not always have to be in control to feel safe.
I like that. What's one thing that made you really happy recently?
Oh my God. Going to Chicago 2 weekends ago, because in the situation I've been in, I've been really putting myself through a funk, and I'm like, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. And my one friend, she's like, you're punishing yourself for something that you didn't really do.
Yeah.
You are allowed to still have fun.
Yeah.
You have resources, you're gonna be okay. So I just said, F it, and just impromptu bought a flight to go to Chicago for a weekend, and I caught up with friends, an old coworker. I used to be his boss, so it was fun to kind of see him and his flair. And then I caught up with fraternity brothers who I haven't seen in like since we've graduated,
Mhm.
and it was just such a fun because I haven't been to Chicago in so long, and it was just such a good trip. I flew home feeling very refreshed.
Last question. What is your hottest take? Or maybe you already did it with the Apple stuff. I don't know.
No, that's not my hottest take.
Have a hotter take?
I I have two hot takes, if that's okay.
Fine.
I'll do one political, one not political.
Oh,
If that's okay.
that's fine with me.
Uh,
I'll cut it out if I want.
yeah, yeah. My political hot take is that President Biden was a traditional president during untraditional times,
Mm.
and we are in the type of situation we're in today because we, as an American people, have forgotten that it is not just a privilege to vote, but it's a right to vote. And the way that President Biden ran this country, if it was any other time frame, he would be more loved.
Mm.
But since he ran it during a time with such calcification and ran it during a time with so much happening at once,
Mhm.
pandemic, inflation, wars, all this
It
stuff.
was not flexible.
And then on top of that, he got more bipartisan bills done than any president in our lifetime. And I'm even talking about homeboy Obama. Gets no credit, no credit, because he was really focused on being a traditional president, which I think the idea of a traditional president kind of went out the window
Mhm.
2012.
Right.
And for him to get the oats, for him, he would have to do things that are not natural to him.
Mhm.
He likes to be in smaller spaces. He likes to be more intimate. He likes to be more personable. But I feel that if he would have wasted our tax dollars to put his name on everything, people would be like, oh, I love President Biden.
Mm.
But his idea is that the federal government should do its job and not be in the forefront of everyone's head,
Mhm.
which is how a lot of these politicians used to be. But we're now in this heightened area where people are very much, I think it's a good thing, but people are like, I didn't know what my government's doing every day. But the way they realize it is horrible. And because we've realized, like, we've had a president before him that had a pep rally for everything he signed, which in hindsight is a waste of tax dollars.
Sure. But it's great
It
marketing.
was great marketing.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I feel that, and everyone, like, especially now, people are mad at him. Like, I'm not like 100% aligned to Joe Biden, but I'm very, very proud of what he did. And I will always 10 toes down state that he was a really good president and he did a lot of good things for us. But he did it in a very traditional American way, which is why he gets no credit. And I hope that one day the history books write about it in goodness.
Mm.
And even when it comes to, like, he had the most diverse cabinet, he ensured, like, he ensured that everyone's issues had a resolution,
Mm.
whether you were rural America with broadband or whether you're in the urban cities when it comes to education and healthcare. He had an idea and he got a lot of bipartisan things done, in which we live in a society now that if you want to work across the aisle, you're viewed as backstabbing the enemy.
Mhm.
Now, granted, I can argue that, like, working with some Republicans are like that, but that's my hot take is that, like, recent right now, Biden was a traditional president during untraditional times, and I feel bad that he is not getting his flowers.
Okay.
The other one that we kind of discussed as well is that we have a male identity mental health crisis that no
Mm.
one wants to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I don't know that's a hot take. I think it's very obvious. Well, maybe it is maybe it's a hot take for some people.
I think it's obvious for people who understand why,
Mhm.
but I think a lot of people, because they don't want to single out men specifically, they'll say we have a mental health crisis in our country, which is not wrong. But I think way that we are navigating it with our young men and our older men, we're just not really addressing that. And I think and I argue the hot take part of that
Mhm.
is that it's actually affecting everything that we do as a society.
Mm.
How we run our country, how we run our companies, how we are in relationships, how we raise our children, because of the fact that our men are suffering in silence and feel like they can only express anger and other negative emotions. Bringing it back to, like, the podcast, but I've had this hot take for a while. But because of that, I think it is putting the male population down a very dangerous slope. And instead of them actually finding ways of becoming, like, healthier and taking care of themselves, they're getting resentment.
Mm.
And I think that's part of the reason why when you look at, who's going to higher education, who's now getting all these bigger jobs, who's now are living longer. Women are living longer than men. Women are getting more degrees than men. Women, and not even just 4-year degrees, community college, vocational classes. Women are doing things now that they were told they were not allowed to do, but they're doing that, and so because of that, society is getting sick and tired of seeing women do stuff,
Mm.
and but part of it is because we as men, there's so many friends here I have that they're more focused on being day traders and actually really doing something, and there's nothing wrong with that, but this idea of I have to get rich fast so I can provide, I think that is just a unhealthy track.
Mhm.
And I talk to a lot of my male friends, especially my male straight friends, about, like, the power of therapy, and they're like, "How are you still in it for 3 years?" Like, I was like, "Because it's changed." I'm now more in, like, a coaching perspective, and, I said, "I see my therapist the same reason why you see your doctor." They're like, "Well, I don't go see my doctor because I'm like, and that's exactly why you find out when you're 40 or 45, you have these issues. Like, we you can live your life, millennials specifically, because we have pioneered so much newness, but now we're in this age of like parenting that we're leaning heavy on what our parents did.
Yep.
We can respect and love our parents and do things differently.
Yep.
Me as a man at 34 do not have to walk this earth the same way my father did. And it's not a disrespect to him at all. And so quickly we'll lean on like, well, this is what I was raised, what I was taught. That's just a one direction. But you can say, my dad always told me that I need to just suck it up. But I realized that led me down a lot of bad paths. And so, and kind of what you mentioned as well, like I've obviously said with that, men do not know how to be friends
Mm-hmm.
to each other. So, since men do not know how to be friends to each other, we don't know how to be good boyfriends and husbands to our women or our men. And because of that, we don't know how to really be good fathers. And society has changed. We don't need you just to go to work all day and come back home. We need you to actually be a father. We need you to be involved. We need you to be a friend. We need you to ask your girlfriend or your wife or your whatever, how are you feeling today? And then we want you to tell us how you're feeling today as well. Um, but since men do not know how to express themselves, they suffer in silence. And I think that leads to a lot of other dangerous paths. And until we as Americans, I'm talking to Americans only, once we get over hurting people's feelings, rip the effing band-aid off and just chart the path.
Yep.
But we don't want to upset someone because the minute we upset someone, then we're blah, 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 blah. But sometimes you have to call the spade a spade. And because no matter what we do, men and women, they're 50% of this country. And so if 50% of this country is definitely going down an identity crisis, until we address that, this country can never do anything else. Until men feel comfortable realizing that being a man has a very wide spectrum, it's just going to continue to get worse. And I've even experienced that when it comes to dating.
Yeah.
And so, in which people always assume that, oh, well, you're gay, that you must be this. No, I'm still a man who likes men. That's is that simple.
Yeah.
And it sucks because sometimes I can sense people and I can sense when people have an inner confliction in themselves and I sense it. I sense inner confliction so much with men and I sense hopelessness with women. And I sense the hopelessness with women because they really want to be there for their male counterparts, whether it's their friends, whatever. But you could, as God says in the Bible or the interpretation, he will only help those who help themselves. And women can only help their male counterparts when the male counterparts are like, I need help.
Mm.
And we do not. And for me personally, I am learning how to ask for help. And with me, if I am a very educated, well-rounded, connected, and personable person, I can only imagine what other men are going through.
Right. You've been given a lot more tools.
Yeah. And I played with them.
Yeah.
I played with them and I'm like, oh, this is a fun tool.
Yeah.
This is a fun tool.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's my like right now, that's like my main hot take, especially when I
What's a
talk
good
to a lot
hot
of when I talk to a lot of my straight men and
Yeah.
the way they talk about their relationships, I'm like, go outside.
Yeah.
Go outside, read a book, and be okay. So
Wow. Well, thank you. This was such a good conversation.
I loved it.
I think we hit most everything in the parking lot.
Yeah. Did we
Because
how do you think?
us, I think we like have touched on
Almost everything.
Yeah. I wrote one last note there about the Enneagram because that's something I get nerdy about.
I forget what my number is.
Well, I was curious if you know what it is, but if you don't,
I do know what it is. I do know the concept,
Yeah.
but I do not know my number. My Myers-Briggs is an ENFJ
Okay.
through and through.
ENFP.
Ooh, so perspective. I'm an ENFJ. So was Barack Obama. And Oprah. And then I'm
Charismatic.
and then it's because I'm a Leo rising. Because I'm a Capricorn Sun, stellium, Pisces Moon, Leo rising. So a lot of structure, a lot of emotion, which I hide behind with the structure.
Yeah.
And then I have the charisma, so people don't really realize that I have a lot of emotion.
Nice. I made Virgo with a Libra ascending. And I'm like
Ooh.
Libra cusp. And so a lot of, it's like a very mixed bag. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's a whole
That's a whole other conversation, girl.
other podcast.
Yeah. Because my Venus is in Aquarius, which means I have
Ooh.
unconventional ways of navigating romance. Which is why I joke, I'm like, so that means I was gay since day one.
I don't know much about astrology, but I think it's fascinating. I do tarot. That's my woo-woo. But I think astrology is pretty cool. But different day, different podcast.
Last hot take, and then we're done. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. If people believe a man in the sky can create the universe, but can't remain the fact that bodies of mass affect each other, I have a really hard time of people telling me that astrology is trash, but they're over here praying to someone they never met. Not saying I'm not religious. I am a Christian. I was born a Christian. I believe in God and I pray. But I'm also like, if I can believe in this energy force, and if we can say physically the moon controls the tides, and then Jupiter's magnetism ring is what protects Earth from so many meteorites and asteroids, why can we not say that all these different celestial bodies are affecting the environment they're around, which affects how we navigate our space, which affects how we are. And so I always argue we're cosmic beings in a physical form. So why do we think that we're immune to the cosmos?
Sounds like your idea of God has just been expanded.
Yes.
It's not
My idea of God has been expanded. My idea of life has been expanded. One friend told me, and then we're done, that your soul goes through the zodiac wheel. And so it's that's when they said Aries is the baby of the zodiac, because that's your first time in that dimension. And I'm like, oh, interesting.
Sounds like the fool's journey in tarot.
Yeah. And so there's so much that we don't know versus what we do know. And me being so inquisitive, I just love learning all these different theories, all these different ideas, and what could be.
That's very cool. Well, thank you. Yeah, Obviously, we're gonna have to do. I guess we can just hang out and have the conversation.
Absolutely,
We
girl.
don't have to record it. But thanks.
I
all for
completely forgot for a
listening.
while that this was on me.
Just going. That's why I like doing the little mics. This episode is sponsored by Ricola. Ricola, if you would like to get in touch, I'd love to talk with you. Thank you for listening. Subscribe. Listen out for the next one.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And happy birthday.
Capricorn seasons are around the corner. May your goals be ready.
I'm not.